Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions, where we are waking the world up to what is possible, one brave word at a time. And here today to help me with that mission are some of the amazing authors of a new book we have coming out called The Ancestors Within. Recognize and embrace the gifts of your origins. And before I introduce these amazing people to you, let me just say a humongous thank you to Amy Gillespie Doherty, the lead author of not only this book, but the whole series of The Ancestors Within. Man, Amy, I'm so honored and grateful to you to be with you, collaborating with you. You brought the most stellar group of humans together for these books, and really the community that you have built around this ancestral healing topic and everything that has gone with it is just quite amazing. And I'm super grateful to you for all of that. So you guys, I have some pretty amazing authors to introduce you to today. Ariane Thomas is an international healer, author, teacher, speaker, shaman, and Akashic record reader dedicated to supporting others heal family and personal trauma to discover their life path. Crystal Rasmussen is a generational healing teacher and spiritual guide who supports you in releasing pain and suffering from your ancient bloodline stored within your genetic lineage to heal you today. I have Frank Byram with me. He's a scientist and teacher who helps his clients develop and grow a mindful daily practice as a foundation for flourishing living. And Rosemary Levesque is the owner of Second Nature Healing, Center for Spiritual Healing, Guidance, and Training, where people take back their power to heal. You guys, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
That's that moment where I'll get all of you unmuted at the same time. Right. All right. I'm so excited to share your brave words, your stories, your master tools. And let's hear a little bit about these chapters. So Ariane, you are going to start this party off. Tell us about your chapter.
I'd be delighted to. I have chapter 3 on opening your Akashic records and connecting with your soul guides for advice and support. And I am delighted to share this with all of the readers because the Akashic records are this library of wisdom from our past lives. And our ancestors are the librarians that help us access this wisdom. Our soul guides consist of all of the teachers in our lifetimes that we've been here on earth, and the masters that guide us throughout lifetimes and throughout all of our trials and tribulations. And then our soul family, all of those people who have incarnated with us time after time after time again. So that when we go into the Akashic records, we have all of this support. Now, some people may be going, well, what are the Akashic records? The Akashic records are held in a dimension that is accessible to the entire universe. It is a dimension of love and support and compassion and wisdom. And what it does is the Akashic records contain all of our thoughts, actions, behaviors, intentions of all of our lifetimes in this universe. And so what good does that do us, right? It's like, well, there's that library over there. Well, that's nice. But what happens is that we have access to all of the wisdom of all of our lifetimes. So that if we had a lifetime where we were saving the world as a king or as a protector of our people or as a healer, we were an herbalist, we were a midwife, we were the medicine man in the tribe. All of those lifetime experiences are available to us. And all we have to do is step into those Akashic records, create a sacred, safe space, go into a deep meditation, and ask to be taken to those Akashic records. And there, depending upon your orientation, it may be a library like the one behind Frank, that has millions of books and scrolls and parchments. Or if we're of the younger generation, shall we say, you can envision it as a database so that there's all of these records that you can scroll through, and our guides, our ancestors, and our soul family. And we can ask all kinds of questions there, like, what is our soul purpose? Because our souls are incarnated so that we not only learn through experience, but we also have a passion in our soul for some kind of life path. And that life path continues over and over and over again through all of our lifetimes. And so we can tap into that life path and go, I'm not sure where I'm going this time around, or I'm stuck. I don't know if I should stay in this job or leave. Should I stay in this area? Should I move? You go into the Akashic Records and ask your soul family, hey, what wisdom do you have? How can I get into the records to guide me on answering these questions, on solving these problems, on healing this issue? And they're always there. They're always ready to help. And so they bring out the right record and it unfolds in front of you, either as a vision or maybe as a story, or maybe it's just a feeling of, oh, this is what I need to do. And so when you step into the Akashic Records, the wisdom of the ages is at your fingertips. That's what my chapter is all about.
I love it. Thank you. I was going to say, oh, could you give us a little bit of an explanation of what that is? And you just perfectly went right there. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Ariane. And listeners, you're going to hear more about the Akashic Records from some of our other authors. This is an interesting topic, and it's one of the topics I get excited about this because what if you could learn something today that could change everything? Something you've never heard of, never dabbled with, don't have any clue what this is or how to access, like the Akashic Records that we're talking about. Today is going to be some of the information that could really change your life. Mm-hmm. And Ariane's chapter is one of those things. So thank you. Crystal, you're up next. Tell us about your amazing chapter.
My chapter is activating and awakening your ancestral gifts. You are the medicine of your lineage. And within it, I facilitate generational healing a lot. That's my job. That's what I do. I teach. And so we're releasing those densities from the traumas. But what we also carry is we forget that we also have our ancestors' gifts and their strengths, and those things can come forward, whether it's love or hope or courage, bravery, intuitive gifts. And throughout that, I speak about how, different cultures have recognized that the ancestors bring people forward and bring you to different circumstances and situations in your life because there's something that you have to offer because of your gifts. And so it's a little bit about that.
So I was talking in another interview about this idea that you just talked about a little bit. And a lot of the time we think about ancestral healing in a hard way, a difficult way, the wounds that we have to heal. And you just mentioned, there's also these gifts, like there's also these other things that you can look at and think about coming down the line to you. And then you have an opportunity to express that gift to the world. And it's a very positive thing versus, you said, releasing the density from the traumas. What else do you want to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we focus, a lot of times we do focus on the densities, the negative aspects that we inherit from our families. But we often forget that there are really good things that our parents, our grandparents, and all of those that walked before us brought forward for us. We would not be who we are today if we didn't have every ancestor that walked before us. We are a compilation of all of those, and all of those gifts lie within our bloodline, within the memory of ourselves. So you can easily access those and bring those forward as well.
And so if we think about the healing just for a minute, each one of those, negative and positive is just a judgment, right? But when it comes down and this thing is in you and it's something that doesn't feel good and you want to change it, you recognize it as a pattern, right? We talked about that in our very first book in this series, recognizing those patterns. I think that you would agree with me to say that each one of those moments is an opportunity, like much bigger than you think, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, they are.
Yes.
Sure.
This is where I think we give people hope beyond maybe what they've been exposed to in the past. Thank you, Crystal.
Good, thank you.
Frank, how about you? Tell us about your chapter.
Well, my chapter is chapter 9. It's the courage to follow your heart. And it's in the same theme as the previous two authors, accessing your intuition at any moment, certainly tied to exactly what they're talking about. So I think the thing I noticed is my generation grew up very different than the previous generation. My parents came from farming stock, my grandparents from farming stock. They were close to the land, had tons of time. This allowed them something that we don't have, or I don't think I had, and that is, I'm attached to technology and science and on the go and rushing, and I admit I lost my ability not only for intuition but to trust my own heart in it all. And it has been a sort of a life project, sort of post 50, we'll say, to reclaim that and to help other people understand on a daily basis. You get there by establishing sort of this foundation, and part of that foundation from my point of view is learning to have that meditation time, to establish sort of your relationship with yourself, with your internal essence, with your intuition. You do it over I do it over a cup of tea in the morning, outside many times. Once you've established that over time, what occurs is you're at the office or something's a real problem, whatnot, grab a cup of tea. Your brain will immediately flip into, oh, wait a minute, this is a moment of intuition. And so you can start to learn to access it. It's tough on the spot. It really is. But once you establish the practice and have these foundations, you can call them up anytime you need to. And that's really, I think, sort of one of the missing pieces. It's so simple. We all love to read. I love reading self-help. I love reading all these authors. And what tends to happen is we read it and move on and forget the fact that we have to establish a foundation to draw on and to live on. And that does change over time, but that's really the simple message to some extent, that I finally realized that that's how my parents and my grandparents were doing it. That's how they knew what was going on. That's how they knew what was going on and how it helped me, in my life as I grew up. And it was like a duh moment. And once I realized it, it was pretty straightforward to establish it. And I want to see other people do the same thing.
I loved how you talked about that in your chapter. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my parents weren't going around every day talking about intuition. The language wasn't there, even though they were trusting they were doing the practice. They just weren't talking about it and teaching about it. And I think about that sometimes. Maybe they did it sometimes better, sometimes not so good. You know, they were modeling whatever was happening. But I loved how you wrote about that to open up a kind of a different perspective about what's been handed down to you and what is yours to deal with.
Yeah, there were clearly the farming, if you think about it, there's plenty of time. I mean, you are working every day, but you're kind of by yourself and you're doing your things. And of course, you sort of meet family and other people working and whatnot, but there's a ton of time by yourself. You're touching the earth. You're near the earth. You're out in nature a tremendous amount. In modern times, I've lost that. I get in my car, drive to work, come back, these types of things. And because we've lost it, I think we doubly must reclaim it. And we have to do something beyond what they did. It was naturally part of their lives and the way they worked and the way they lived and the seasons and what was going on. It's not naturally mine. I have to claim it. And we wonder why we struggle. I wondered why I struggled. I talked to plenty of people who wonder why they struggle. They're just disconnected from what they know. And the struggle really is that problem of being in the situation and knowing something different, and they can't reconcile the two. But touching your intuition, becoming present with it, learning it, listening to it is the way to start to set a compass, to have a guide. You have an internal guide, just like you have the Akashic Records and the other guides and your ancestors and prayers of your ancestors from the previous book that I talked about. These things exist, but we have to reach to them, and they're to our benefit, really.
Oh my gosh, no doubt. Thank you, Frank. All right, Rosemary, you are up. Tell us about your chapter.
My chapter is chapter 24, Anointing, Hidden Secrets to Activate Your Intuition. Gee, what a popular topic. Huh?
Yes. How did we get all of you together today? I don't know how that happens.
Oh, goodness. Well, I wanted to tell you how I began writing my chapter. My background is biology, and so I'm very connected, as Frank was pointing out, connected to nature, connected to the land. I'm not out there farming, but I have a connection. And so I started writing my chapter as a poem. And I want to read the second verse because there may be a little wrench in here that you haven't thought of yet. So the second verse says, "If I could, please let me remember the birches and maples whose leaves shimmer and whose roots mingle with mine among my ancestors of cedar and pine." So I'm going back even further, deeper into ancestry of who was here first, right? My ancestors are the plants. And biologically, if you study chlorophyll and hemoglobin, they're almost identical molecules, differing only in the fact that hemoglobin has iron in the center and chlorophyll has magnesium in the center. And so, wow, the blood of plants and the blood of humans, they are so similar. How can we ignore that common ancestry that we all have? And so my chapter on anointing is more about the plant connection, that these plants are giving their aromas. You know, have you walked by a cedar tree and smelled it? Or, you know, obviously the flowers, right? People like to smell flowers, but what about the bark? Here in Oregon, more in the eastern side, we have Ponderosa Pine, and you can smell it all through the forest. But if you scratch the bark of Ponderosa Pine, you know what that smells like? Butterscotch. It smells like butterscotch. What does an aroma do for you when you smell something familiar or unfamiliar? It's going to invoke an emotion, and your emotions will connect you to something deeper than what your thoughts can connect you to. And so in my chapter, I talk about activating your intuition by using anointing and aromatherapy.
Mm. It was eucalyptus trees in Marin County, where I grew up in California. You're helping me smell that right now. Thank you very much.
You can remember the smell, right?
Mhm.
That's wonderful. And if I say cinnamon, you can smell cinnamon. Yes. So that memory is stored in your cells.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Rosemary. Oh my goodness, how nice to think about that. Yeah, don't make me hungry with the cinnamon now. Come on. Okay, I have this next question for all of you, and Crystal, you're going to be first up for this. So, when you first learned about ancestral healing and that it was possible to connect with your ancestors and work through these sorts of modalities that you all are talking about today to help you heal things that were going on in your life now that you wanted to change, I hope that you guys will share one of those aha moments when you really realized what was possible. What do you think of, Crystal?
Oh my goodness. So, there's so much that I could share on that topic.
I know there's probably 100 things. Do your best. Do your best. Give me one.
Easily. You know, growing up, I didn't, we all have childhood stuff, right? But I didn't there wasn't a lot of massive dysfunction in my family. So I didn't really understand the whole ancestral healing for a really long time. But what happened is I began studying with the founder of generational healing. And I went through an apprenticeship training with her. And then I was at a 7-day certification training where she spoke about how we carry the unhealed traumas within the memory of ourselves. And they're affecting us mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And I began to think wow, I could really begin to see patterns within my family, right? And then she facilitated a session on me. And what transpired from that is the ancestor that stepped forward showed me her life and the story. And I felt such a deep connection to her. And after that session, I felt just there was so much energy. I had so much clarity. And I was like, wow, this is really phenomenal in how I feel better. My ancestors received this healing. This is amazing. And then what happened the next day is I was invited to facilitate a session, a generational healing session on another student. And that moment changed my life and how I operate completely, because an ancestor from this woman's lineage stepped forward and he shared his story. I had stepped into this multidimensional framework and he's telling me what happened in his life and what he needs healing with. And as I was working, I was blown away by what he had shared about the experience of his life and how there were certain points that related with that person on the table. And as that session completed, the ancestor himself was so incredibly grateful for the healing. It was the most humbling, rewarding experience I had ever had. I had tears streaming down my face. And it was like, oh my gosh, I just found my purpose, because not only can we communicate and listen to the ancestors' stories and offer them healing and receiving their gifts, but offer them healing, we can heal ourselves and heal our lineage. And within all of that, heal the earth, and it really create this ripple effect across the globe.
Yeah, that's no small potatoes story there. I just found my purpose. I heard that line.
Yep.
Right. That's the caliber of the kind of thing we're talking about here for the listeners too. Like, our book is full of ways to understand how to connect. You may be listening to this today, just like, how do I do it? I don't even really know what they're talking about. I don't know how, right? But that is what we're here to teach you. And in all of the voices and all of the different kinds of stories, like Crystal just shared with you. Thank you so much, Crystal. That's amazing. Frank, how about you? When you really learned what was possible, give us an aha moment of yours.
I think the aha moments sometimes come in the deepest moments, unfortunately, but I think that's where we're desperate enough to discover it. And I think in a very deep time in my life where it felt like kind of everything fell apart. I was in the middle of a divorce, contract I was working on went away, had to sell my house. You just have all these things going on in a really short period of time, and you're like, it's not supposed to work this way. It right? And if we kind of like do it right and say our prayers and try to be a good person, doesn't it like work out? And it doesn't. And so at that point, I was just like, what do I do? What worked stopped working. And I realized at that point I was running in place and living loops. I kept coming back to probably ancestral things, but certainly things within my life that I was just living over and over again, resisting what needed to occur. And sort of by accident, it was just really in that valley that I was like, what did Dad do? What did Grandma, Granddad do? Because they came through the Depression, right? They came pre-war. They lived through some really, really hard times. And at that point, I started to try to say what was going on, because I would say as a scientist, I sort of rejected the training, right? I wanted to be different. I want to be modern. I want to be science. I want to go do, and realize that, you know what? Absolutely wrong. I can't be creative in science if I'm not touching that tuition, going back to that ancestry and seeing what was that. And ultimately I learned this: there was no way to escape the loops without their help, without going back. And there was no way to move beyond the loops. And those are the emotional loops that we all carry, often from childhood traumas, but also ancestors' traumas. We're moving forward, and we want to escape them for ourselves. We got to do something different. And the unfortunate part is, I think probably like many people, I was taught in school, taught in church, Sunday school, all those kinds of things we all did that we thought was the right answers. The reality is it didn't get me there. And when it didn't get me there and all fell apart, I had to try something different. And I went back. It was a returning home of some sort. It was returning back to the ancestral paths and what was passed down. And I think it was a blessing in disguise, oddly enough. And sometimes those great valleys are that, even though we don't want to go, even though I resisted, absolutely did not want to do it. It was a miserable time, but I don't know I would be who I am today if I hadn't gone through it. So it turned out to be a great time for the rest of my life. And I think we all have those times in life, and we just have to recognize and be willing to take that risk. Ultimately, your heart, trusting that intuition, is going to help you navigate out of those times. It's not all that stuff outside you, it's the stuff inside you is going to help you.
Really powerful, Frank. Thank you. The realization that you were living in the loops, and then what you said about, you can't get out without their help. So you are all essentially gifting tools of awareness. And that's what that's making me think of is, anything that can enhance that awareness, even just a little micro step, can open up your whole world to something different.
The loops are really, really intriguing. Is that there's little ones and big ones. It's the big ones that get you. The little ones we kind of deal with. We really think we're dealing with the little ones all the time. Absolutely not. You got to work on the big ones, the ones that come about every decade, because they really do take you by surprise. So,
that's a good clarification. So you're talking about the ones that come back in multiple years, not the ones you might be living every day. Is that what you mean by little and big?
Absolutely. We tend to focus on the little ones because we know those kind of character things that we'd like to improve on and whatnot. But it's those big ones that you've resisted over decades to some extent. When they come back the second time, oh my gracious, the wave gets bigger. And if you put it off, if you put it off, you don't get it in your 20s and 30s, boy, by the time it gets to your 50s, that wave is a monster. And the reality is, my belief is that my ancestors lived them too. They did pass the ability for me to connect and understand how to navigate Adam. I watched them navigate Adam. I didn't understand that I was watching them navigate Adam. And that was the big super aha that they showed me, even though they didn't know how to tell me and I didn't understand it.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to do the second getting married thing. That might be my biggest loop. Okay, let's move on. Rosemary, what was your aha?
Well, I hope I don't cry.
Uh-oh.
When I tell this story, it resonates so deeply with me. When I was in my 20s and living overseas, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And she sent me a letter that was pre-internet. She sent me a letter. By the time you get this letter, I will have already had surgery, chemo, she's going through it. Boy, did I get home in a hurry, right? And I spent 6 months with her, watching her decline. And I won't go into that whole story, but here's the clincher. On the day of her funeral, I did not go to the reception. I stayed at home, there it goes, in her chair. And I fell asleep holding a rosary. And when I woke up, I couldn't move my hands. They were numb. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know if it was my mother or, just spirit. I didn't know. But I remembered that feeling. And then I experienced that exact same feeling again 2 more times. Once, when I was attuned to Reiki Master, my mother met me in the temple and she held my hands. And I had that feeling of that numbness in my hands. And I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing, right? There's no barrier. There's no interference, separation of distance or time. And we teach that, of course, in Reiki. There isn't any time, there isn't any space. So the moment on the day of her funeral where I felt that numbness in my hands was the moment that was created when she met me in the temple and was holding my hands. And then one more time at a retreat, Soul Treat with the Wellness Universe, at the very end, when all these other people were having amazing, life-changing experiences, and I was nothing, right? Nothing. But at the very end, when we were finally able to quiet ourselves and experience a meditation, my hands got numb again. And I knew that the work that I was doing, the presentations that I were giving, the stepping forward on my life path with sound healing, with medicinal aromatherapy, with energy healing, with all of those things and teaching them was the purpose. And that was my mother walking beside me and holding my hands the whole time. That was my aha. That's my biggest aha. You don't get any more after that.
That's a pretty big one. That is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you all for sharing these amazing stories. Okay, Ariane, how about you on this one? When you really realized what was possible, what was one of your ahas?
Well, I first learned of the Akashic Records from my great aunt, who was a devout Catholic. And as I used to clean her house on Saturdays. So I was over there one day, whining about my family and, how badly they were treating me and all that. And she said, everything you think and say and do is being held in the records, in heaven. So you better pay attention. Scared the pants off me. Just scared the pants off me. And it's like, someone's watching all the time. That was my introduction to the Akashic Records, because she said, there's a place called the Akashic Records where all this is in there. And it's like, oh my God. And then when I went into the Akashic Records, when I learned that we could actually access the Akashic Records, it's like, I think I need to see what's in there, right? And I stepped into the Akashic Records, and it's like being enfolded in love. It is like being surrounded by everyone that has always supported you, has always guided you, and has helped heal you throughout the ages. And it's like, wow, what a great place. You know, well, I could spend all my time in libraries as it is, but this was an even greater library because it's not about all of those miscellaneous petty things, daily things, oh, I didn't do the dishes today. This is about your soul essence. This is about a place that you can go to be truly known and recognized and held and guided. And there's all these loving people surrounding you. And so it is such a wonderful place, because even if you just go in to the record hall and sit there, you are enfolded in love. And it touched me very deeply. And let me just tell you a quick story, because when I first started doing Akashic record reading, a man came to me who was getting ready to retire and had high blood pressure, had had high blood pressure all of his life, and didn't know what he was going to do with his life. And he goes, what do I do now? I mean, I've been in business for 40 years. And it's like, okay, let's see what's going to happen. We viewed his entire lifetime on Earth, and he had always been a musician. He'd always been a bard and a troubadour and moving from place to place and singing and carrying news and doing all of those things that musicians do. And he had always played music in his life on the weekends in bands and things, but that wasn't what he was doing primarily. Well, this lifetime was about him staying in one place and raising a family and not having to move and travel and be at anyone else's beck and call, to really find roots for himself and a family. And it just opened up his heart, because his heart was always in his music. And I talked to him 3 months later, and he had reduced his blood pressure medicine by 50%. And his blood pressure continued to drop, and he was, of course, he was retired, but his health was getting so much better because now he was following his life purpose. And the guides said, okay, you have accomplished what you came here to do. You were rooted, you had your family in one place, and now it's time for you to open up your true heart's desire, which is music.
Mm.
And those are the kinds of messages I get for myself when I go into the Akashic Records. It's like, well, should I do this? Okay, what's your heart's desire? Look at this. This is what happened. Look at this. This is what happened. Okay, here's what we have for you. And that's why you go into the Akashic Records.
Nice.
Because we always have the ability to choose.
I love how you tied it in with a little bit of the physical thing too, because I think a lot of people don't realize this is a physical body, mind, soul kind of healing opportunity here. And it can directly relate to physical things that your body is experiencing, symptoms, illness, all the things, right? I appreciate you bringing that into the mix here. All right, you guys, I have another question I want to move around to all of you for. Frank, I'm going to start with you for this one. We healer, author, expert people, we like to talk about ourselves more as guides or facilitators on the journey. Like, we don't fix people. We really empower them to come back to that connection. You've all been talking about the intuition connection in all of your different beautiful ways, right? We're here to help them back to their own wisdom. So what I was hoping you would all do is share with our listeners one way they can feel empowered today in that way. What would you say, Frank?
Well, I think the first thing to feel empowered is to know you got it. It's there. I think the biggest issue for me and those around or around me is they forgot. A good friend was at the office just a few days ago and just overwhelmed, struggling. I thought I'd never seen her to that level, and I had to remind her, you have what you need. You have done the work. You have spent the last decade doing this work, and this loop, this wave came, and the universe will test you. It'll test to see if you learned that lesson, and this is one of those tests. Take a few minutes, take a big breath, recenter, touch your heart, ask. And I came back a few hours later. She's like, "That's exactly what I needed." And for days, she had been struggling literally with this new work and task and things going on. It's so easy, even for myself who practices, and probably everybody on this call who practices it. We also, the wave comes, the one we don't expect. And it does feel like you're treading water and maybe drowning a little bit. And we have to remind ourselves. And for the most part, a lot of really what I'm doing is reminding people, just waking them up to the possibility. And once she was reminded, she had it. She always had it. She just, for just a few days, lost it. And I think that's what we live in this society. These waves come and come and come, and big ones come, like the pandemic we've been dealing with, and small ones all the time. And we have to remind ourselves. And I think our ancestors are a great way to do it, because we can be reminded of our ancestors. And I think they're trying to remind us and trying to reach out to us, and we're not listening. You gotta listen.
Remembering is a really good thing. Thank you, Frank. Okay, Rosemary, what's your version of this? How would you help someone feel a little more empowered today?
Well, it always occurs to me that people forget to breathe. And Frank, I heard you say, take a breath, right? Well, consciously take a breath, because when you're not consciously doing it, of course, your body will take over, and you're breathing, you're of course, inhaling, exhaling. But conscious breathing is a little bit different. When you consciously breathe, you inhale, you're filling your lungs, you're going a little deeper perhaps than what you're used to going, expanding that. And of course, oxygen is everything. What happens when you're not breathing? What do they call a person who is not breathing? You don't want to go there. That's right. So you want to consciously breathe and do it more often. I would say more often, until it becomes a habit that you notice. And you might be sitting there noticing that your shoulders are tight, or that you're not paying attention to what you're doing. You're focused on the screen, or you're focused on your task. Taking a moment to breathe connects you instantly to nature. And this is where we have to establish our connection, because we are here in physical form. We are here on this planet at this time. We are made of the stuff of the earth, the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, all of those elements, same as the plants. We're all made of the same stuff, and we're all breathing. And so consciously breathing would be my best answer for today.
Perfect one. Big rib expanding pelvic bowl breath. Everyone with me. Let's do it. And then remembering to do that. So I'll tie Frank's thing in, like, we're going to remember that we can do that. That's so awesome. All right, Ariane, how about you? What's another way that we can do this?
Well, as Frank says, those waves come up and loop over and over again. And when I was in my 20s and 30s, when I get hit with one of those waves, it would just knock me around because I didn't have any tools. I didn't have any place to go. I didn't know where to seek answers. And I didn't know that the answers were within. And that's exactly what Frank and Rosemary have been talking about, is that we tend to be taught to look for answers outside of ourselves, in books, in science, in experts, as we all are, and and you don't know where to go when you don't know yourself, where you don't know where your inner core is, where your center is, where who you truly are is. And once I found teachers that showed me how to access my inner self, my inner wisdom, my inner knowledge, like Frank says, you just breathe and you go in, and the answers are right there. And so, if there's confusion in your life, if there's chaos, yes, breathe and find your core, find your inner sense of self. And that inner sense of self is connected to everything, to your ancestors, to the plants, to the planet, to other people, and to your inner knowledge. And that's the greatest gift you can have.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. You're making me think of people who have used the M word, meditation, right? But it doesn't have to be all that complicated. So I appreciate the way all of you are talking about just this very simple connection points. Okay, so Crystal, you're going to close us out on this one today. What's another way that you can help our listeners feel empowered?
Well, I love what everybody shared. And so it's essential every day to do things like that. And to feel empowered, for me, like getting out in nature, to really be able to find myself, to find that quiet space, and come back to my center and balance within. You're breathing, you're remembering, you're coming back to your core. But what it also does is it grounds you. And we can get so caught up in our everyday life and all of the things that we're supposed to do or should do. And so, really like look at those things. And are those things that you really need to do right now? Are you doing them based on somebody else or what you should do, supposed to do? So really just look at what do you need? What do you need? And choose that just for the day, just for the moment. Whether it's, I need 5 minutes to just breathe, then do that. Choose on your values and what's going to fill you up, because it will bring you much more joy and you will feel much more empowered within it.
Yes, I love how you tied in everybody's thing together, and then we do all of those things, and then just put your feet on the grass while you're doing all of them and get out into the nature. And yes, I love that. I know that a lot of you practice all of these tools and multiple more. And I really appreciate you breaking it down into these simple steps. Authors, thank you so much for what you do in the world and for being here today to share it with everyone.
Thank you so much,
for
Laura.
having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So to all of our listeners, if one of these authors said something today that gave you the goosebumps, sparked something in you, resonated, Well, go on down into our show notes because I have them hooked up with their websites. Take a little exploration, see what other things they're up to. They are so very generously here for you to answer questions and give you support and take you that next step and be that guide for you. So please, you'll find all of their information. Take the next step. And the other way that you can rub elbows with all of our amazing authors is the Ancestors Within community on Facebook that Amy Gillespie Doherty, she's our lead author for this book series. She put that community together so that you could carry on the conversation. And I think it's brilliant. Where do you get a place where you can go with the book and the author of the book and be able to ask questions? So take advantage of that. And if you're around and you would like to join us for our live stream book launch party, that is happening on June 7th at 12 noon Eastern. It's going to be on the Brave Healer Productions Facebook page. I'm going to have all of the Ancestors Within authors there to share their wisdom with you. We're going to have a great time with that. And if you happen to be listening to this after June 7th, well, hop over to Amazon because the book is ready and you can get your copy at that point. Lastly, today, everyone, remember, your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. So it's time to be brave. See you next time, everyone. Thank you, authors.
Bye.
Thank you. See ya.